Hog Sty.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hog Sty. I am not Alex Cease. Unfortunately, I am Steve Thomas. Alex Cease is out, but fortunately, we have with us, as usual, Jamual. But before we get into the show, we need to do our ad real quick here. Our partner, Symbol. Symbol is the stock market for sports that allows you to trade sports teams like stock and earn cash payouts when your teams win. Symbol has blended sports in the stock market to offer you a new way to invest in and profit off of your favorite teams without the high fees and the high losses of gambling. Use your sports knowledge to buy low, sell high, and earn cash payouts when your teams win. Join the 3,000 plus early adapters who have started to invest in their favorite teams. Visit www.symbol.app or visit the link in the description on our website, which is symbol.app/hogsty to create a free account. And when you deposit, make sure you use the promo code HOGSTY for a $10 deposit bonus and buy a share of Sim WFT. The WFT had an exciting free agency, and if you believe in the direction of the franchise, invest in them with Symbol. Visit https symbol.app/hogsty and use the promo code hogsty for a $10 deposit bonus to help build your portfolio. So there we go. Okay, we are into the heart of OTA season, whatnot. So we've got a lot to talk about, but Jamual, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. By the time this show comes out, I will have been in my second wedding in as little as 12 months. My friend is getting married on Sunday. My good boy, we go back since high school, so I'm pretty happy for him. And you know, things are good. So this is gonna be a pretty good weekend. So yeah, I'm in a good spot. How you feeling, boss?
So now, are you in the wedding? Like you're the best man or anything like that, or one of the groomsmen?
Not the best man. I think last time I actually did speak to y'all about the last wedding I was in September. I was the best man in that one. And luckily this time I'm not, because I don't know how many speeches I can handle. It's nothing wrong with, like, you know, speaking from the heart, especially when it comes to your close people, your family and friends. But you know what I'm saying? Look, I don't mind public speaking, but it's sometimes too much is a little too much. So I'm glad I got a day off. But you know, the crazy thing is, so that is one wedding, right? The one in September. But now I got this one coming up on Sunday. I have another one that I'm going to in June. I'm not a part of that one. I have another one that I'm a part of in September of this year. Then I have another one coming up in January. I don't know if I'm a part of that one yet, but I will be there. And then I have a destination wedding in February of next year that I'm actually a part of. So this cycle, I don't know what's going on, but this is kind of crazy. And I'm happy for everybody. I just hope that I don't ever come across a time where I'm in like 5 or 6 weddings in a short period of time like this ever again. Like, this has been the most expensive month.
Well, see, you're of the age, though. See, you're late 20s. This is when people are getting married. You have a bunch of people. They're going to start bugging you, oh, yeah, soon. You know, they will. And the other thing I find funny is that you can babble endlessly into a microphone for hours about sports, but yet you're hesitant about the 2-minute wedding speech.
So yes, that's true. And that's why I was like, it didn't bother me in September. Like, I ain't new to this. I'm true to this. Like, that's where I was when I did that in September, you know, and I got good feedback in terms of like my composure and stuff like that. So I was like, all right. I mean, I was kind of aware that I would do okay, but doing it multiple times is like, I don't want that type of pressure on me. I don't need it. I don't want it. You know what I'm saying? I'm good for 1 or 2. But like I told you, I got like 5 coming up. That ain't.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Let me get a break.
And the other thing is, just as a public service announcement, generally, don't do destination weddings. It's rude. You know, you make people travel a long way and spend a lot of money for your wedding. Yeah. You know, unless you're Jay-Z and you can afford to bring everybody there, don't make people travel.
Well, for context, so that is an opinion. I've never been to a destination wedding, and I've heard about it. I've heard that they're inexpensive in the sense of people just going up there and showing up. I don't know. Like, I've heard that, but the context behind this one is that the bride or the fiance or bride to be, excuse me, she's actually from Jamaica, so she's going back to where she's from. So that's kind of the context.
That's
behind
fair.
this one.
I mean, if that's her home, that may be fair.
Yeah,
But
she's
I'm
going
like,
back to where she came from.
if you want to have like your wedding in like Hawaii, I think you got to bring everybody there. You know, it's funny we mentioned Jay-Z, by the way, because there's I'd say probably the principal Washington football story this week, or Redskins story this week, is the rumor was that Jay-Z, the rapper slash music mogul slash Mr. Beyonce Knowles, I think at this point, is supposedly gathering assets, as the story went, to try to buy a minority share of the Washington football team. Now, I think, Jamal, that this story came from our buddy Burgundy blog first.
Correct.
If that is,
yes.
Yeah. I've got a ton of thoughts on this, actually. But let's start with you, Jamal.
Go
ahead.
Let me go first, because I don't, the details. It's just business. That's your forte. So let me get my ignorant comments out the way. So I don't know much about. So I'll put it this way. Put it from a fan's perspective, right? When people hear that, they get all googly eyed and all of a sudden, like, their hopes, shoot up. Some did, like, at the initial hearing of it, it's like, Jay-Z, like, that'll be good for us type thing. And while I think it'll be cool, admittedly, I think it'll be cool. My first questions is, and I'm not putting this on all the fan base when I said what I just said, but my initial questions would be like, what does that mean for us? And that's kind of where I put things at. Him taking minority ownership, presumably minority ownership of the Washington football team. I just don't know how that'll impact the fans. Maybe the experience will be better because you can get better marketing opportunities. You can get more brand recognition having Jay-Z his name attached to Washington football team, and you can probably open some doors that Dan Snyder probably couldn't open by himself. Or just with his name alone, and Jay-Z's brand could, obviously help that in this situation. And I think for us, it's not going to do much on the field unless you keep winning, or unless you keep winning. Ha, that's funny. Unless you start winning, right?
Start.
Yeah, unless you start winning, it'll help you out in that sense, but. Washington has a long way to go on that side of the ball, but from a business aspect, Jay-Z is a guy who's always been looking for ways to become a bigger and better entrepreneur. This is another business venture for him. I seen somebody online that mentioned, he was a Cowboys fan once before. I don't really know who he used to be a fan of, but at this point, when he's talking business, being a fan of the Cowboys has very little to do with, a business venture. And I don't think he's going to attach his name to something that he wants to destroy. And that was kind of perception of the tweet that I heard. I just don't see that with Jay-Z. And I think, again, to wrap it up, I think that it'll be cool. It'll be something unique. And I think it'll be some doors open with him having his name officially attached to the Washington football team. But at the same time, it's not. I don't think it means much in the sense that fans will see a day-to-day improvement to how the Washington football team is operating. Like, that's just a business part of it.
Yeah, I think if it happened, the fans would see zero change to the way the teams operate. First of all, I don't know if I buy this. I mean, I'm not distrusting Burgundy blog. I mean, again, we sort of know him a little bit, and he's a good dude. But it just seems like a really weird pairing to me. Number one, Dan Snyder, Jay-Z. Dan is a guy who has a high opinion of himself, and having a celebrity in the building. And a guy who everybody likes. I mean, even if you don't like his music, like, I'm not a fan of his music really, but who doesn't like Jay-Z, right? He's a very popular, very charismatic guy. It just seems like a weird pairing that Dan would want to do that. But that aside, I think the greater context of this thing here is that the NFL most likely, if I had to guess, probably has an implicit mandate to find more minority owners and minority owners. I would guess that is probably something they're trying to do. And remember that Roger Goodell handed the Super Bowl halftime show to Jay-Z 2 years ago. Now, frankly, I don't think he's done much to improve the halftime show, but he's basically the executive producer of the halftime show. So he already has a relationship with the NFL. So I would think the context of this is that Roger Goodell and or the owners or someone is probably trying to find Jay-Z a way into ownership somewhere. And they know that Dan Snyder just had to pay 800 and almost $900 million to buy out his prior minority owners. So maybe he's one of the ones that would want a minority partner. So I think that's probably if it's true at all, because it wasn't reported by a mainstream media source. If it's true at all, I think that's the context. In terms of what he would bring, I mean, it would be nothing on the field. I mean, minority shareholders have no vote, no say, no standing with the NFL at all. What it would do, I think, as you mentioned, Jamal, is it would bring some greater marketing opportunities to Washington, because he brings with him a whole bunch of attention. And so he would bring probably sponsors, probably other celebrity types to be on the sidelines and whatnot. It would bring attention on ESPN and all the other talking head shows because he would be around. And so I think that is the benefit of having Jay-Z. But frankly, I think the fan base is probably overrating his impact, and not him in particular. Just generally speaking, any minority share. Don't forget, doesn't he not own a minority share of the Brooklyn Nets? This is Jay-Z, right? And other than him being on center court, it hasn't really had an impact necessarily. I mean, he may have had an impact in free agent signing. I don't know. I'm kind of speculating here. But beyond that, and that's not as big a problem in the NFL anyway. So I think we're sort of overrating a little bit, not you, but just the fan base generally, maybe overrating what the impact of what Jay-Z would have.
So two things, because he is like the Rock Nation. I think they do have like an agency group too, sports agency group. And,
yes, they definitely do.
So I don't know the ins and outs of these things, but I would imagine.
I can tell you that. Let me stop you right there real fast about the Rock Nation. I think he would probably have to divest himself of Rock Nation if he's going to have an ownership interest in the team, because it's a direct conflict of interest.
That's where I was about to get at. Like, I don't know the ins and outs of the agency group, but I would imagine it would be some type of issues. Like, people can presume that he can bring people over here because of his relationship with the agencies, but I think that also that kind of could be a legal issue too. And I'm not too sure, like, me personally, I don't know like the science behind it all, but I would imagine you did, and you just said that. Another thing for Washington, though, again from a fan perspective, is this is a really good time. 2020, like this new generation, it is a really good time to kind of bring on somebody like Jay-Z, because his name, again, that we all know is pretty popular. Beyonce, again, is a name that we all know is pretty popular. But there are younger people out here who kind of actually look up to Jay-Z. They actually kind of have their eyes on the Washington football team for however long they may be on the Washington football team. Who knows? But those kids growing up, the teenagers growing up who may not identify with the team may start paying attention to the Washington football team, and all of a sudden they may start like, all right, this is the team that I rock with now, for whatever reason. Maybe they have the good defense. Maybe they had eyes on Chase Young. It's like, I like the way he plays football. Maybe they had eyes on Terry McLaurin now, and like, all right, this is my favorite player now. I got eyes on the Washington football team. This may be that moment for Washington football fans where you can kind of bring in a newer generation of fans, that the fans that we've lost, because for 10 plus years, we've lost a younger generation of fans because we just weren't good. So 2020 and in this new decade, this is kind of the right time to bring a guy like Jay-Z in, because there's a potential that he can bring new eyes on here, and it could be the younger eyes, and where we can build up that younger generation of fans that we've lost for a long period of time.
Do you realize how many 99 Problems jerseys Washington's going to sell?
See, there it goes. Like, look, 99, Chase Young, Jay-Z, all that stuff. Play of words, I love it, and they'll find a way to market it for sure.
Yeah, I think everything you're saying. I agree with in terms of marketing and all that. I just think it's a weird pairing. I just don't know if Dan would want someone who drastically overshadows himself in every sense of the word in the building. I'm not saying
Well,
it's a bad thing. It would be a good thing for the team. I just don't know if Dan Snyder could handle it.
that's fair. That's fair. We got to remember too. Like Dan is the guy who loves to be behind the scenes. Like he don't like to talk to the media. He don't like none of that stuff. He could when he gets nervous. If it's just two people, him, Dan Snyder, and Jay-Z, he could just put Jay-Z out there. Be like, hey man, talk to him. Like, cause I can't do it. Like another thing. The only reason why I bring this up, and this is random, but it's going back to my point of putting Jay-Z out there. Like he kind of, that media thing that he did in LA when he was looking at the stadiums. I personally believe that, that scenery, that situation, the context behind it, like he's with his group of people while they're looking at stadiums, and he simply, I think that he called TMZ out there for that. Like he probably told them that he was going to be at this spot at this time. Oh, he said that.
Predicted that on. We talked about that on It's Just Business in the last episode of the Hog Sty where you were gone, and said we both all thought that somebody dropped a hint.
Yeah, I think he called him, and I think that was probably him being in a comfort zone with those people, just so he can give an update on what they had going on. But with that being said, when it comes to bigger things and where it's more people in an environment that he's expected to speak live or something like that in front of however many amount of people, eventually it'll get to the point where he would rather put somebody else out there, either whether it be Jason Wright, whether it be Jay-Z. Like those two can probably tag team on media inquiries and stuff like that. So I'm just saying in the sense that yes, Dan may be in the background, or he may not want to have somebody overshadow him in a sense, but at the same time, he is that one guy who doesn't like to be out there in the limelight.
Well, yeah, Jason Wright's already doing that. He's already taken a lot of the stuff. I don't know if the NFL would love the idea of a minority shareholder being so far out front like that. I've never heard of that. I've never seen it in the NFL. Because the NFL designates someone as the principal owner. There's in the NFL governance documents, it says one person has to be the principal owner. That's why, Sony doesn't buy an NFL team. They don't let that. You have to have a principal owner, and that is Dan Snyder. So I don't know if the NFL ownership group as a whole would really want Jay-Z to be like the regular spokesman for Dan Snyder. Jason Wright, yes. At the end of the day, he's an employee. And he's a team president. He has an official role. So, yes. Jay-Z, I think, would have to take a more informal role, wherein he's sort of generally marketing for the team, talking them up, wearing the jerseys. You'd have to think he'd be the first one to wear a Chase Young jersey all around, right? That would only make sense.
For sure.
And you could have him doing some marketing stuff with the team, but I don't know if the NFL would want him out there doing formal pressers like that. I think that's definitely Jason Wright's role.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, you know better than me, so I tend to lean to whatever decisions or opinions you have with this stuff. They're more informed. So yeah, that's kind of where my head was at. But I think it's a good opportunity, just from the marketing aspect. But I do want fans to know that this just does not have a lot to do. Like, he's not gonna take over Dan's spot. He's not gonna be the savior of this team. And he's also not going to be the guy who turns things around on the field for the Washington football team.
Yeah, well, number one, Jay-Z can't afford to buy Dan out. This team is worth $3 billion at least. So he'd have to have a whole ownership group and all that, and there's been no indication he's putting that together. It just says he's gathering assets. And just for context here, Dan just bought the 40% from the other minority shareholders for about $900 million. So any share
$900 million. Oh my God.
Now, part of me says maybe Dan wants to get some of that money back by selling it to someone else, enter Jay-Z, but I don't know if Jay-Z has $900 million laying around. to do this either. So I think he's probably, if this is true, he's probably looking at a small share percentage-wise. A very small share would be my guess. Like, for example, Magic Johnson bought, they made a big deal when the current ownership group bought the Dodgers, and Magic Johnson was a part of that group. Turns out he only invested $50 million, and the team is worth, again, about, it was $2.5 billion. So he's got, like, what is that, 2%? Very, very small share. My guess is that that's probably what something along those lines is what Jay-Z would buy into, I would assume. It's an interesting story, though. I mean, I don't know. I can't see the harm in it.
Attention.
Yeah, and I can't see the harm in it because all it's going to do is draw some fairly positive press towards Washington in a time when they could use it. Lord knows. So, yeah, so that's good. Well, let's move on. I think we've talked Jay-Z up enough. The next thing that I think Washington did this week is they signed yet another tight end, Ricky Seals-Jones. Now, Ricky spent a year last season with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I would like to note that this is the second 2020 Kansas City tight end that Washington has added. If you recall, Deion Yelder was also with Kansas City as a tight end last year. This tight end group is huge. I mean, massive. This is Seals-Jones is tight end number 8. I don't really know what Washington's thinking here by adding all these tight ends.
Wait, hold on. Tight end number 8. We're sorry. So Logan Thomas, the 2 rookies, Ricky Seals, the two Kansas City tight ends. Who am I missing?
Well, you got Bates. You got Dylan Cantrell, Tamarick Hemingway.
Okay, those 2.
Samus
Oh,
Reyes,
and then the dude from Seattle that used to be on Seattle too.
Tyrone Swoops.
Tyrone Swoops. Okay,
yeah.
All right. Okay.
So that's 8 with the addition of Seals-Jones. So, I mean, it's competition. They have the roster spot, so I don't have a problem with it. It just seems like it's a lot.
I agree. It's 8. That's 8 is a lot, especially it's not the wide receiver group where you can keep like 6 or maybe 7. Like 8 tight ends, you're narrowing that down to like 3. And my initial thought, and why obviously somebody's gonna be on the practice squad, but my initial thought when Seals-Jones got here was more so, I don't think Bates and I don't think Reyes alone, those are going to be enough for the Washington football team. Even if they think highly of Bates, we know at this point, especially after Reyes' first practice, we know that coaches or scouts, whoever talked to the media, I can't remember which media member it was, but they told them, he has a long way to go. We know that. But they're not going to give up on him, clearly. And my initial thought when they signed Ricky Seals-Jones, who's probably the most experienced out of all of them, is simply, out of all of them outside of Logan, out of all of them is more so, they're not about to bank on 2 rookies. They're not about to bank on 2 rookies to back up Logan Thomas. And they're getting as much veteran help possible as they can in the offseason and training camp to see who they can have behind Logan, but also who can they help, who in turn can help kind of contribute to the development of the 2 younger guys. I don't know what the plan is with Reyes in the sense of, can they afford to put him on the practice squad because of his athletic profile? So are they willing to commit to 4 tight ends on this team? But at the same time, Seals-Jones and Logan Thomas is probably more beneficial in the now to this team versus banking on 2 tight ends who kind of really hasn't done much. I think the other people are camp bodies, and they're giving them an opportunity to actually be on this roster and put some film out there. I don't think much of the other guys that you had mentioned, not excluding the 4 that I'm primarily talking about. I don't think they're going to be here much longer. Tyrone Swoops and the other names that I clearly forgot already. But
Everybody's forgotten him.
yeah, everybody's forgotten him. Exactly. But my point is, I think that Ricky Seals is here for a longer stay. I think that he's going to be here to back up Logan Thomas until Bates is ready to take over, or he shows that he can take over way quicker than anybody anticipated, or if Reyes can show that he can be a playmaker for this team using his athletic profile. If he can show that in his raw ability, because he has a profile, if he can show that he can make plays in his raw ability right now, they may be like, okay, we can afford to move on from these other guys and keep these two rookies. But right now, I don't think they're taking a chance.
Seals Jones actually isn't really any less experienced than Logan Thomas at tight end.
Okay, and I did want to clarify. I didn't mean to cut you off. I did want to clarify that. I'm not saying Ricky Seals Jones is because I meant to say this. I'm not saying that he's any type of beast or really good tight end, but he is a guy who is experienced enough where he can back up Logan and spot fill in whatever situations. But he's not just because he's a name that we all are familiar with. I don't want y'all to think that he's a dominant, sneaky good athlete or sneaky good tight end. He's just good enough where he can fill in and be a little bit better than the rookies that they put in here or that they drafted.
I think so. I think that's right. And again, one benefit to him is he's experienced. Logan Thomas switched to tight end in 2017, really the end of the 2016 season. So he's really been a tight end for 4 years. Seals Jones is a 2017 undrafted free agent. So they've both played tight end in the NFL about that long. I mean, Seals Jones has 120 targets in his career to Logan Thomas 164, the bulk of which came last year. So Seals Jones is another big guy. He fits the mold. Like, you notice what the mold is. Washington isn't bringing in a bunch of H-backs. They're bringing in a bunch of inline tight end size guys. Seals Jones, 6'5", 243 pounds. That's almost exactly the size of Logan Thomas. 6'5", 6'6", 260, 250. So yeah, and his contract, by the way, is $1.4 million. So that's a pretty big number. And I don't think that they're going to put a guy with that size contract on the bench. So I do think that they probably brought Seals Jones in here to play. Notice, excuse me, what they did this after they've seen Sammis Reyes in a rookie camp and in an OTA. And I think you're exactly right. And as great as the idea of Sammis Reyes is, the reality of Sammis Reyes is he's probably not ready to play football. And so they're going to have to either, like you said, sacrifice a roster spot for him and just keep him on the bench, or put him on the practice squad and then just promote him if somebody tries to sign him. Because I just don't. I mean, again, I love the athletic profile, but I don't think he's ready to play. I think, and I think if he was, Ricky Seals Jones wouldn't be here, frankly. So, I like Seals Jones. I think he's an experienced guy. He hasn't had a ton of game time, but he's an experienced NFL vet, and that can only help on a group that has no experience at all.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of crazy, man, because when we look at the on paper improvements of this team, we know what John Bates, Jesus Christ, brings to the table. We know he is kind of the blocker that Logan Thomas struggles to be, but he's also a receiver who has exceptional hands, and that's kind of what Logan Thomas is as well. But he's also a little fine-tuned as a route runner, and that's or above average. I'll put it that way, above average route runner. So he kind of has all the tools to be to be a tight end, just not the speed aspect, which is at tight end you can get away with being Jason Witten, like a prime Jason Witten. And you can still make plays. Like he wasn't the fastest, but he'll always get you those 10 yards and that first down. I could live with that. So with that being said, like it's kind of crazy because we had these on paper expectations and anticipation for these tight ends, but we also have to recognize the fact that sometimes these guys just need some work. And it's not their fault that they aren't ready. Some like they're drafted in the 4th round. Sammis Reyes was a project, and we knew that from the beginning. He played basketball Like he came over here to play basketball. So you just have to understand where they are in their development, and it may take some time. Like you're not going to see that instant reward for signing us for drafting a really good tight end that's projected to be a really good tight end, and two, drafting or signing a really good athlete with a great athletic profile. You're not going to see that instant gratification for what you think is a sneaky good thing and that, oh, Washington's on the come up. It takes time sometimes. And I think coaches are recognizing that, and they're telling you through their actions with 8 tight ends right now. Look, man, as much as we're high on John Bates and Sammis Reyes, look, give them some time. Relax.
Coaches know better.
Exactly. Like, just pay attention to what they're doing with their transactions, man.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's to me, bringing in Ricky Seals-Jones is a clear sign that the team knows they need some experience. They need an actual NFL player, who can actually play, not a bunch of projects, not a bunch of totally inexperienced rookies or second-year players, not a dude from Chile who is a basketball player. They need people who can actually play football. And so if you project forward, Logan Thomas is number one. John Bates is going to make the roster. And so you have to think that Seals-Jones has the next, probably the greatest chance of getting the third spot over any of these other guys. Cantrell, Hemingway. I mean, Hemingway's been around, a year? And he was elevated at the end of last year. So, he's probably number 4 right now. I don't even know what to think of Deion Yelder at this point. And Tyrone Swoop's obviously a long shot. Dylan Cantrell. The only thing about Dylan Cantrell is he's really an H-back. He's 6'3", he's a little smaller, so he's kind of in a category by himself. All the rest of these guys are 6'5", 6'6", that kind of fit the same mold. Okay, so that is Ricky Seals-Jones. We have Washington did go through OTAs this week. There wasn't a ton of news, really, I don't think. Ryan Fitzpatrick came out and said we're just sort of installing the basics, and that's to be expected. To me, the bigger news was who wasn't there. Montez Sweat, Chase Young not there, among a couple others. I'm a little surprised that Chase Young at least didn't show up. I mean, he's from D.C., for God's sakes. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I was telling you before the show that it was, and locally, it was a conversation on the radio. I don't know as much as Twitter for whatever reason. I was not on Twitter that much this week, but especially on the radio when I was listening to my podcast, and there was some talk through Chase Young about like a whole segments about him not being there. And throughout these conversations, the one thing that stood out to me, whether I agreed with the people on the radio or disagreed with them, Doc Walker made a comment, and he said, and I'm a butcher his quote verbatim. So what I will say is this is what the gist of his quote was. He said, "Leaders, as a leader, you should never put yourself in a position to be questioned. That's the first thing. And the second thing was leaders are not what was it? Leaders shouldn't have to worry, like shouldn't have to think like if it's optional, like they shouldn't put themselves in a position to like not be there. Like they should still be there no matter what. It shouldn't be a question in their head if they have the option not to be there. They should be there. Whether or not the coaches make it optional, they need to see your face, and that's what leaders do. And then the second thing was they shouldn't put themselves in a position to be questioned. Again, remember this. I butchered his quote verbatim, so I gave you a synopsis. So basically, that's the thing that stood out to me with what Doc Walker said. And like in my head, I'm like, that is a very valid question. I think that was the whole nature of the topic itself, is that people were questioning why the hell he wasn't there. And the dangerous part was presuming it was intentional, because we don't know if there was a legitimate excuse for why he couldn't be there. We don't know that part. And people were making assumptions as to why he wasn't there. And I don't think that was fair to Chase. But I also want to say this point. with him. My personal opinion, as I'm giving an overview of this, my personal opinion is I don't care if he was there or not. Be there for the mandatory things. But at the same time, I completely understood where Doc was. But I just feel like when it comes to Chase, when it comes to a few other people, this is just a situation where you got to understand in the media, you're gonna get, especially with a guy like Chase, right? You don't want to get on his bad side. Whether or not you're only asking a question, you got to understand this is kind of negative to Chase. And if you think about it, Steve, when there was a reason why Deshaun Jackson did not like the media around here. They like no matter what he did, even though he showed up before he got hurt, like there's nothing you could do for somebody getting hurt. But he showed up on the field. Like he made plays down the field. He was an elite playmaker here. One of the best playmakers we had in the passing game that outside of Jordan Reed, like he was one of those guys. But you know what the reasons why he didn't like the media here, and I'm not blaming the media for this, but y'all have the biggest voice, especially on the radio. When you do things like that, you can kind of turn a guy sour, and you got to be careful when you continue these conversations because trust me, the players will hear it one way or another. They will hear it, and you just got to be careful because you turn a guy sour here, and it kind of can fracture things. Deshaun Jackson did not like the media for all the reasons, whatever he had, but you keep getting on the guy case for something simple as showing up for a voluntary thing.
Well, with Deshaun, it started, the media, whether right or wrong, implied that he was a gangbanger. If you recall when he was signed, they implied that he had an affiliation with, I think it was the Bloods gang out of L.A. And I don't know, who knows what's true or not true, but the media definitely implied that. So I think it kind of started off on the wrong foot. And then they always sort of imply that he had a bad attitude a little bit. And so I do think that Deshaun probably did not like the media for that reason. As to Chase, yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe he had a personal problem. I mean, God, who knows what? Maybe he was at a destination wedding in Jamaica for all we know. Who knows? I mean, there may be a reason. But what Doc is saying, and maybe you ought to get Doc on the show here to explain all this. I think it sounds, I didn't hear the quote, but what it sounds like, what you're saying, Doc's an old school guy. He's saying, if you're a leader, you got to be there. That's what he's saying. And I totally agree. I mean, if I was an NFL player, I wouldn't miss these OTAs because, frankly, what else do you have to do? Yeah, you've got all the money in the world. You don't need to work. You don't need an extra job. Your job is to be there when Washington is practicing. And so if it were me personally, I wouldn't miss any of them. That having been said, you're right. It's a bit unfair to Chase. He didn't say where he was. There's a difference between he's got a personal family matter or whatever, and he just doesn't feel like being there because he's making a commercial in L.A. There's a huge difference there, and we don't know what it is. Same with Montez Sweat. Who knows? I do think that absent some extraordinary circumstances, I would be critical of them not being there. That's just me, but you're right in saying we really don't know what the situation was at all. In terms of any other news out of the OTAs, there really wasn't anything. I think we've learned, as we already mentioned, that Samus Reyes probably isn't ready. We've learned that Ryan Fitzpatrick is definitely in charge in terms of the quarterback room. There's no doubt about that. They're putting him out there as a starter. He's speaking to the media as a starter. He's talking about installation, and there's a long way to go in that. But to me, that's really all we've learned, of OTAs. You have any other OTA thoughts?
Nah. No additional OTA thoughts. It was just the Chase Young thing that was at the top of my head, but
yeah,
it should be a non-issue. I would just advise the media to be careful.
I don't think it's a non-issue. I think it would be a non-issue if he has a valid reason for not being there. If he just doesn't feel like showing up, I kind of agree with Doc, frankly. But we don't know. Like you said, who knows? Okay, so we also have this week our regular position group breakdown segment. Insert theme music here. Someday I'm going to record something for theme music for this. We're talking about tackles this week. The tackle room is interesting, I think. First of all, here's the group. in alphabetical order. Sadiq Charles, if you want to call him a tackle. Samuel Cosme, who's the rookie from Texas. Charles Leno, the free agent they brought in. Rick Leonard, who's a holdover from last year, didn't play much or at all. Cornelius Lucas, last year's starting left tackle. David Sharp, who played a little bit last year, brought in. He was a trade, a sixth-round pick. I think he was a trade for a sixth-round pick with maybe Denver. Was it Denver?
You said Lucas?
No, Sharp.
Oh, Sharp. Okay.
Sharp was, I think,
it was
a trade
either
for a
Denver or Oakland. I mean, Las Vegas, one of them.
Yeah, one of the two. I think it was Denver. And then David Steinmetz. And so that's the group. You have to think, and obviously the big change that we've all talked about, and we talked about it last week, was the departure of Morgan Moses. And I think what happened here is that, Charles Leno was brought in not to be Moses' direct replacement, but he's replacing Moses in the lineup. He's an experienced vet. He's a legitimate starter. I think, to me, there's no doubt he's the starting left tackle this year. And what that does is kick Cornelius Lucas out to right tackle at a much reduced salary. Because Lucas is my chart's on the wrong spot. Lucas's cap hit is only little over $2 million as compared to Moses, who was at over $7 million. So they're saving a lot of money here, and I think they've shored up Fitzpatrick's blind side, and I don't think they're ready to trust Samuel Cosme to start. So in terms of the starters, that's my thought. We can dive into some of the backups here in a minute, but your thoughts on the group as a whole?
I mean, from a macro perspective, you got some versatility there, and you kind of alluded to it without like specifically bringing it up. Like, these guys can play either left tackle or right tackle, and with Morgan, he could have done the same thing, but I think that with them understanding that they had that versatility at a cheaper rate collectively, they could save themselves some money now and getting rid of Morgan. I'm kind of surprised that they cut him so quick, because my idea of having Morgan here was more so to figure out, how they can, have some value or get some value for him, especially from a team who may need a tackle. But it turns out, as we know to date, he still hasn't signed with the team as we're recording this. So maybe they just didn't have any trade partners, and they just did him a favor and cut him early so he can try and latch onto a team pretty quickly for what he wants to do or what works best with him. Anyway, moving forward to the current roster, I think that Cosme is going to be interesting and somebody that we need to pay attention to, in the sense that Lucas was here to start last year, but I don't think his job is a given. I think the one that is a given is Leno. I think Leno is going to earn himself he's going to be given that opportunity, to start with the team. But the battle comes down to Cosme and Lucas for whatever side of the line they're going to be battling for. And the reason why I say that is because when you draft a guy in the second round, as Ron Rivera mentioned, he is looking to play these guys now. Like, they're not looking to sit these early draft picks down and develop them unless they're clearly just not ready. But if they have some semblance of being able to play in the league right away, he'll take the lumps, he'll take the bruises with these guys, and one of those veterans is going to sit on the bench, and I think that's going to be Lucas. And that's kind of where I'm at with the starters. I think So who are you saying? You're saying I think Leno the favorite right at left now tackle. So Leno probably is going to be at left tackle. I think Leno's at left tackle, and the favorite for right tackle right now, from the coach's perspective and what should be the fans' perspective, should be Cosme. And Lucas is going to be the underdog here. So if you had to have some odds set right now, I wouldn't have heavy odds, maybe like plus 175 for Lucas taking over the starting right tackle job, which is, for those who are gamblers, that's not a huge favorite, but it is a pretty good favorite to take over. So almost even, actually, now that I think about it, but he has a slight edge. Excuse me.
Well, yeah, when you see that, by the way, for those of you out there who aren't gamblers, when you see plus 175, that means bet 100, get 175 back. is what it means. And so that's less than 2-1 odds. So it's pretty even, is what Jamal is saying. Because those aren't, that's not, Washington's going to end up in the Super Bowl at plus 5,000 kind of odds. That's pretty close. Obviously the future is Cosmi at left tackle, right? They don't bring a second round pick in who was a left tackle in college to not have him at some point take over left tackle. Leno's only here for a year. And so I think Leno's a hedge. And certainly you don't put Charles Leno at right tackle. So I think the battle is clearly right tackle, and it's entirely up to Sam Cosmi whether he's ready or not. Is he ready to start? I don't know. And so certainly I think one of the two of Cornelius Lucas and Sam Cosmi is the starter, and the other guy is the swing tackle backup. The wild card to me is Sadiq Charles, because I still remember how much our buddy Robbie Duncan came on this show a year ago, and more than a year ago now, and just saying Sadiq Charles praises. And we didn't really see him at all. What, he'd have one snap and got hurt, one series?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, can he play? Can he not play? So I've seen some speculation that maybe he's a guard, but that's kind of fan speculation without basis. So I think he's the wild card of this group.
Don't
and
forget,
the other guy,
they did put him. That's where he got hurt too. That's funny. He got hurt at guard. They put him in there. I forgot who he was replacing, but he had a decent rep, but got hurt.
No, you're right. That's a good point. And the other guys on the roster, Rick Leonard, David Sharp, David Steinmetz, I mean, you got to think they're going to keep 3, maybe 4 tackles at most. Ron Rivera likes versatility, and so he's going to pick the guy who can play guard and tackle in a pinch. So if you think about, and we're going to do interior offensive line next week, so we'll get into guards then, but if you figure that they keep like 9 offensive linemen, so you got your 5 starters, you got your swing tackle for sure, and you've got you probably a backup center and then a backup guard. So the last guy is going to be someone who can play both, guard, tackle, wherever you need to be, and maybe that's where Sadiq Charles is. The Sadiq Charles' problem is he wasn't drafted by this organization, right? Am I wrong in thinking?
He was.
No, you're right.
Last year.
It was last year. Yeah, so he is a part of this coaching staff. So to me, he's kind of got the in on the final spot. If you're thinking about 4
eventually,
maybe so. Yeah, maybe so. I think the future is, like I said, Sam Cosmi at left tackle, somebody at right tackle, but I don't think Charles Leno is more than a stopgap. Cornelius Lucas is a stopgap. So maybe they're hoping Sadiq Charles can be a right tackle. Maybe those are the 2 young guys. Pardon me.
How old is Leno?
Oh, how old is Leno? Give me 1 second here. He's almost 30. He's turning 30 this year.
Turning 30.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually think, because I think if you see Cosmi play well at right tackle, this is me assuming that he ends up getting time there. I don't think they'll be switching him to left tackle. Even though I get your point, but I also think that if Leno played well, which is why I was asking his age, he's only on a 1-year deal. But if Leno ends up playing well, they sign him to an extension. Like 30 years old at tackle, I mean, it's old, but it's not old. Like, you still got 4 years left. Who was that guy? The dude, Andrew Whitworth, I think Whitworth.
Whitworth.
In L.A. He played till he was damn near 40. So I'm not.
Who's the Jason Peters with the Eagles started last year at he's 100 years old.
Yeah, so you can. There's examples out there. I'm not saying there's many, but there's examples out there of players playing beyond 35. And if you can get Leno for 3 more years at left tackle, that's good enough to hold it down for the rest of Ron's contract. Put it that way, because he signed a 5-year deal. You can hold it down for 5 years. Or 3 more years and get if you get an extension, okay, but like you can hold it down for 3 more years until you're age 33 or 32, whatever the math is, depending on his birthday. Like, that's perfect. That's perfectly fine. So that's kind of like if both those two play well at left tackle and right tackle, I don't see Cosme switching. Like he can be a really good, because I think Morgan Moses played left tackle in college.
He did.
Yeah,
and John Jansen, I think, was a left tackle in Michigan for that matter, and was brought here to be right tackle. So you're right. I mean, that's entirely possible. It's a good point about Leno. My only point would be to point out that because he is on a 1-year contract, there's no guarantee that somebody's not going to offer more money. Yeah. He could leave. Because he's on I think he's probably on a 1-year deal for a reason. He probably, wants to parlay a good season into more money, which, more power to him. But that would tell me that he's going to take the highest bidder, which may or may not be Washington. In that regard, irrespective of the rule of 51 right now, Washington's got about $10.6 million invested in the tackle group alone, which is peanuts compared to many other teams. Left tackle is a premium position with premium salary, so they have really gone on the cheap in terms of salary cap for this group, which tells you that maybe they could sign Leno to a bigger deal next year because they haven't invested much in the line. So it's I think it's a telling year. We're going to learn a lot this year. I think we're going to learn if Sadiq Charles can actually play or not, because we really don't know. If Sam Cosme grabs a hold of the right tackle position, we may learn that this year. Cornelius Lucas may be gone next year because Lucas isn't a young guy either. Lucas is also 30. He's turned 30 in July, so he's about to be 30. So there's another guy who could maybe be around for a couple years, but is also on the older side. So I think this year is going to tell us a lot about the future. When we have this conversation next year, at this time, I think we'll know a lot more about the future of this team, or this position group, rather.
Yeah, I agree. We'll know a little bit more.
Yeah.
Preseason should tell us a lot, too.
Yeah. Okay, so that is our position group breakdown this week. I've got one more thing I want to address here, and this wasn't on the roster, Jamal, so forgive me, but the rumors about Aaron Rodgers and Julio Jones just won't go away. So I thought I'd bring this up again. Now, first of all, I'd like to say that I don't like what Shannon Sharp did to Julio. If you guys saw, Sharp called Julio in the middle. What's that show he's on with Skip Bayless?
Undisputed.
That. And leave it to Skip Bayless to, go along with this. But Shannon Sharp called Julio in the middle of the show, live on the air, and did not tell him he was on the air. And at the very end of the conversation, at the very end of the conversation, he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're live on Fox Sports," which is a horrible thing to do, and because Julio used language that he wouldn't use on TV, and But what you can take from that is he probably had a visit with the Dallas Cowboys. Doesn't want to be on the Dallas Cowboys. I keep seeing people, Washington fans out there, hoping that they're gonna sign Julio Jones as an enticement for Aaron Rodgers to try and force a trade to Washington. And I think all of that is insane.
I'm about to say I didn't even know that part. I knew fans wanted Aaron and some fans wanted Julio. Some fans wanted both, but I didn't know they was putting together a theory. That's funny.
Yeah, Julio's been great and all that, but an old wide receiver on a group where we already have, what are we up to, 11 wide receivers? Yeah, 11.
Yeah, but if you end up getting Julio, if you have 11 receivers now, you can easily, without question, cut it down to 5. Like, you can cut it down to 5 or 6 without even hesitating, because you know who you're going to keep and you know who you're not going to keep, because you have Julio, because you have Terry, because you have Curtis, because you have Adam. Like, you know who you're going to cut this. You know how you're going to cut that position group down because you have Julio now. Personally, because we talked about this, I talked about this with on the other podcast. Like, this is easy money for me. But at the same time, because there's been an update, right? At the time in which we were talking, there was speculation that he could go for less than a first. So they were thinking like seconds and third rounders. But there's been an update since Tuesday, and there's been talks that people were offering future first round picks. So
you're talking about for Rodgers, right?
I'm talking about for Julio. That's great.
Julio?
Yeah, they're talking about for Julio. So future first rounders, and with that being said, that's kind of dangerous. That kind of puts me in the territory of, all right, hold up, like, that ain't where I wanted to be anymore. So It all depends on what the result is, but if we're talking about anything less than a first, I'm doing it. But if we're talking about first round picks for receivers, I hesitate because this just isn't it for me anymore. The difference between a first rounder, I mean, you know what you're getting, and if you're talking about future first rounders, I mean that helps, but it kind of gets in the way of finding that quarterback and having ammo to find a quarterback. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I admittedly changed my tune if they're talking about future first round picks.
Yeah. Julio Jones has a $15.3 million base salary this year. So no matter, even if you could talk Atlanta into eating some of the signing bonus, and there's ways, his cap hit's $23 million. You could reduce a little bit, but you ain't getting around the base salary no matter what. And so no matter how you could reduce Julio's salary, that eats up, Julio alone would eat up nearly all of Washington's remaining cap space. And yeah, okay, you cut a couple, one of these receivers, but they're on min salaries anyway. So I don't think it's realistic to bring Julio Jones here, even if you could trade a bag of Doritos for him. I don't think it's realistic that Julio Jones is on this roster, particularly if the theory is you get both Julio and Rodgers. Where is the money coming from for this? Somebody explain to me why you think Washington can invent that level of salary, because Aaron Rodgers' salary cap is like $30 million this year. I'll give you the right number here in a minute, but you're talking, what, $45 million in cap space between the two of those guys? There's no way that could happen, even if you trade Fitzpatrick out of it. Fitzpatrick's salary is only 10, for God's sakes. There is no way that either one of these guys could fit on the roster. So I think it's a fantasy at most. And Rodgers' salary cap this year figures $37 million. So it's just crazy to think they could bring those guys in.
I would take either or, but I won't take both. I could take either or player. This is me personally speaking, not talking about the compensation. Financially, I would take either or, but I won't take both. And when it comes to Rodgers, like, you're talking about a guy who could play at least 3 or 4 more years. I'm fine with that. Like, he has about 3 or 4 more years in him. I'm fine with that. You don't get a talent like him and say, you don't know how it's going to work financially. You make the shit work because that defense is there. You need a guy who can, that's going to compete offensively and make plays for you, especially as a passer. And a little bit more consistent, a little bit. I'm being nice here, but a little bit more consistent than Fitzpatrick. Like, he's a bona fide top 5 quarterback, and I'm taking that financial burden because I'm banking on going from the wild card, fighting for a wild card / 4th seed NFC East type thing, to now we're talking about, can we make it outside of the NFC Championship game? Yeah. So that's where we go from.
You could make Rodgers work financially if you really wanted to. What you would do is you have to get rid of Fitzpatrick, which you would want to do, and then you could probably convert some of his base salary into signing bonus and then tack on another couple years at the end, and you could probably squeeze him in. But it's almost impossible to bring both. But as to Green Bay, I mean, I still believe that Green Bay just would have to be insane to trade Aaron Rodgers no matter how much he whines and cries, I think. So I don't think it's realistic to think that Green Bay is going to trade him. Because for one thing, Rodgers really isn't allowed to hold out under the salary cap or under the CBA. So his choice is you either show up or you retire. If Green Bay wants to play hardball, that's his only option. So I don't think Rodgers is very realistic. Julio would be more realistic because they could just trade him and it would be easy and you could figure out a way how to make the salary cap work. So, but I definitely don't think both could be on this team financially. Just, it's almost impossible. All right. Well, we've reached the end of our hour. We've hit it almost exactly, which is a miracle. So let's see. I believe Rick Snyder's Season of Discontent will be back this week. He's been on vacation. We have all of our regular written content out there as usual. I hope everybody is having a great Memorial Day weekend. You're going to hear this on Memorial Day. Try to do something fun with your family, and remember why we're here, why Memorial Day exists, which is to honor those soldiers who died in defense of our country. It's important to me. So everybody have a great day, and we will see you next time.
Yep. Peace.